What's up, everybody? It's Eric from GameShampoo.com. Today is Sunday, January 19th. I almost said December for some reason, but today is January 19th, 2014, and I know I've been saying that this month has been kind of slow on releases and whatever, but clearly that was not actually the case, because there's been hella indie games coming out on Steam lately, and there's been a lot of stuff to cover, actually. Lots of financial stuff, which I always find pretty interesting, and lots of smaller games, which again I also find pretty interesting, and some big games in between. We reviewed Assassin's Creed Liberation HD on the PC, but it's also on the PS3 and the Xbox 360, and we did that on Tuesday, I believe, when the game released. I guess that was actually a day before the game released officially. But we had a review of that, and that is up on GameShampoo.com/magazine right now if you're at all curious. I know there's probably a lot of people out there who like Assassin's Creed, and I just touched Dota 2 on my monitor. Let's get that out of there. Probably a lot of people out there who like Assassin's Creed but who haven't played Liberation yet because it's on the Vita. It was, prior to this, a Vita exclusive, and it actually does fill in some kind of important, maybe not like super important, but like kind of things, like fills in some holes that you would probably be curious about if you played 3 and 4, and kind of noted some of that weird like Abstergo Entertainment, that weird transition, and the references in 4 about how Liberation was basically just a game created by Abstergo. All kinds of weird stuff going on in Assassin's Creed. Not to get sidetracked like immediately, but we got a review of Liberation HD, so let's just start with the reviews, I guess. That was our major review over the last week, and that was a 6 out of 10 score. Like I said, we published it on Tuesday, and basically there's kind of compound issues here when you're talking about Assassin's Creed Liberation HD. The primary issue is that it's just not as compelling an Assassin's Creed game as especially 4, which, to make matters worse, just came out 2 months ago, but also not as good as Assassin's Creed 3 or Brotherhood. I'd say it's probably maybe on par with Revelations. I don't know. I didn't play a ton of Revelations, so I can't say for sure, but I know there were some definite kind of mechanical missteps with the tower defense stuff in there. And it seemed like they're kind of grasping at straws for ways to make that series stand out from last year's entry. And so Liberation is kind of gimmicky like that too. You have this system where Aveline, who's the protagonist of this game, who is, I should say, a very interesting protagonist, more so than Connor was, and more so than Ezio was in the end. Certainly he was awesome in the beginning, but I got tired of him for sure after Brotherhood was over. She's really interesting, both in part because of her own personal story and kind of her journey to help out her mentor, and then how that kind of transforms into this larger tale as the game goes on. And also because of the fact that she's the first female assassin, she's the first African-American assassin. She's like a mixture of African-American and French, I think. And the setting of the game is really interesting. It goes to New Orleans, and they use all that tree climbing tech from Assassin's Creed 3 that is still pretty cool to see in action when it actually works properly, which you can say that about all of the climbing in those games. They still really haven't quite nailed that stuff down yet. But especially when you compare it to 4, that's just ridiculous timing for Ubisoft to be putting those two games out so close to each other, because 4 was this awesome game that kind of rewrote a lot of the rules of Assassin's Creed while still sticking to those principles of climbing and sinking at the viewpoints and assassinating dudes. But they did it in such a loose framework the game was as much about piloting a ship around as it was capturing, viewpoints or killing, assassinating dudes, whatever. And there's just so much of that ship stuff that you could pretty much busy yourself with that for most of the game if you weren't really super into the Assassin's Creed traditional kind of stuff. And then, of course, the game is on next gen, so it looks really beautiful, really HD and high resolution and everything, and the voice acting is great, the story is fun, the protagonist is fun. They changed up the gameplay a lot, and I can't really see myself going back. And so, releasing a game that is essentially just a huge backward step, 2 months later, makes Revelations seem worse by comparison. And then there's the fact that the central mechanic, which is changing between these three costumes, the lady, the slave, and I guess the assassin is the third one. It's just not that compelling, and it doesn't really change up the gameplay in significant enough of a way to really warrant being in the game at all. Basically, without going into too much depth, there's more detail in the review, obviously, but basically, if you're an assassin, you can run around and assassinate dudes and do as an assassin always does. If you're a lady, that's kind of on the polar opposite end of that spectrum, and you can just kind of do the menacing wrist blade thing where you walk up to a guy and then you snicked your wrist blades out and then they go back away. That thing that you do to people that you can't kill, but you can't actually stab anybody. You can't start a fight. You can't climb. You can't do parkour at all. You just walk around pretty much. But then the flip side to that is that you can walk into guarded areas. So, areas that would previously be highlighted in red on the map are now, they're still highlighted red, but you can go into them and people won't suspect you because you're just some fancy lady walking around. And you can actually charm the guards into following you around like a pet, pretty much, by going up and giving them oh hey, pretty sexy eyes. That's my sexy eyes, and they'll follow you around and they won't try to fight you or anything. So that can be really useful, but I don't feel like they made that great a use of the charm mechanic, because these guys basically just follow you around and look at you the entire time, and then you sometimes have to do a little dance or blow a kiss at them or whatever to keep them charmed. But it's not fun, really. It's taking a lot of the Assassin's Creed out of an Assassin's Creed game. And then there's the slave, which is kind of a middle ground between the two. And you're you're okay at fighting, but you don't have all the best stuff, and you're better at being stealthy, but you're still kind of conspicuous a little bit and not allowed into certain areas. And basically a lot of the gameplay is just switching up between those three things, and a lot of the mission types are just follow and eavesdrop, and those kind of things that have not been super popular in the core games as of late, and the kind of missions that are probably rating pretty low in Assassin's Creed 4 with the user base and how you can rate each mission and stuff like that. So largely it's just kind of boring in comparison to the last couple core Assassin's Creed games, especially when you take it out of that handheld context and you put it on the same PC that's being used to play Black Flag. That kind of harsh difference becomes all the more readily apparent. So I would probably not recommend that game at a 6 out of 10. It's pretty average. It's definitely not bad. If you want more Assassin's Creed, this is definitely more Assassin's Creed. It's just that it doesn't feel like it's shaking things up enough, and it feels like a step back from Black Flag, which which has DLC of its own now. Freedom Cry is out, and it's not super long. It's maybe 3 to 5 hours, but it's better than Liberation, and it's $10 or something like that. So I would say stick to Black Flag and stick to Freedom Cry if you're really into Assassin's Creed still and you just need more of that stuff. But if you've already gone through all that stuff and you really want to expand upon the story, Liberation is still okay. And it definitely does look a lot nicer than the Vita version too. So I will give that to them. It looks about as good as Assassin's Creed 3 did, which is to say, pretty darn nice. So that's the big review. And then we've got a review of the Banner Saga, which was an 8 out of 10. And this is an indie kickstarted strategy game with really, really beautiful graphics. Kind of reminiscent of cartoons from the early 90s, like cartoon films, but more high definition, and it just pops so much more. And it's just, half the reason you play that game is probably just to look at that game, which is not to diminish the gameplay, but just to kind of tell you how beautiful the artwork in that game really is. The character work is fantastic. Most of the stuff is just still images, or like a still image with a slight animation of like some snow coming by and somebody's hair blowing in the breeze or whatever. But it looks really, really nice, and it kind of makes the game really. It brings it all together, because the world and the lore, while incredibly fascinating and actually like surprisingly deep, is also really bleak and kind of dark in almost a Game of Thrones sort of way. It definitely has echoes of a Game of Thrones, because you're wandering around in the snow. It's like constant winter all the time, and there are these dredge beasts that will come out of the forest and attack people, and they're like savage beasts that have no mercy, and it's definitely got kind of similar bleak, dark undertones, but I don't think it's usually not quite as bloody and violent and messed up as the Game of Thrones can be, but sometimes it is. So that artwork being so bright and so crisp and nice looking is really like a good kind of counterpoint to the grim story. And yeah, it's just super nice looking, and the combat is no slouch either. It's a turn-based strategy game with some really, really light role-playing kind of elements laid over that. But I think the thing that makes the game that much more interesting, the supplement to the turn-based combat, which is at its core fairly basic. It's not quite as deep as something like XCOM, and it's definitely not as deep as something like Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem, for example. Because you're basically moving guys, and you're attacking their shields, and you're attacking their strength, and you're trying to kind of balance out attacking the shield and then attacking the strength. Attacking shields makes strength more vulnerable, but attacking strength is necessary in the end to kill somebody. But that's the basic systems of combat right there. So the thing that adds a little bit more depth is this kind of Oregon Trail style metagame, where you've got this whole caravan of guys coming with you and like following you, and you're basically looking for refuge from these dredge who are chasing after you, and you'll be presented with events and choices along the way where you can either lose followers or gain followers, or lose supplies or gain supplies. Your people have to eat. If they don't eat, their morale goes down, and eventually they'll start dying. You'll start losing people. So you want to obviously like get as much food as you can, keep your people safe. You're going to have to make some tough choices, both in the story and then kind of in these smaller events as you move from like one story set piece to another. And that's the stuff that really compelled me to keep playing. Those choices, there's some really almost like Walking Dead or The Wolf Among Us style choices in there, where you're in a fucked up situation and you really don't know what the right choice is, or if there even is a right choice, and you just have to go with your gut sometimes. And the way the game can just kill off some of your characters, or take away all your food or something like that, and just a text event all of a sudden is just really shocking, and you'll be kind of sitting there wide-eyed sometimes as characters just die because of a choice you made. And so it's one of those like really high stakes, high intensity kind of adventure games, really, that has been kind of making a comeback as of late. And that's what makes it a lot of fun. I think the battles themselves are fun too, but they're pretty basic. So anyways, we've got an 8 out of 10 for the Banner Saga, and if you want to read more about it, you can head over to GameShampoo.com/magazine, where we've got a full review. So, those are the reviews from last week. We have some more interesting reviews coming up, so stay tuned for the end of the video, and I'll tell you all about our plans for next week. But for now, let's talk about the news that happened last week. So we're talking January 12th through today, January 19th. These are all the stories that we've reported on GameShampoo.com in that period of time, and we're going to start with the 19th, and didn't really put up any news today because it's a weekend, but so I guess technically we'll be starting with Friday the 17th, and then working our way back to the beginning of the week. So Nintendo had their earnings conference on Friday, or I guess rather it was Thursday night in Japan, and things are looking bleak. Oh man, what a bummer. The Wii U has continued to move all of nothing. Nintendo projections originally sat at around 9 million units moved by the end of March 2014, which is the end of the fiscal year, for those of you who don't pay a ton of attention to this stuff. And so that's a really important time for companies and their investors as well. So the original projection was 9 million. Those projections have been revised to 2.8 million units sold through by the end of March, which is absolutely, oh god, that's pathetic. I've almost never seen anything that pathetic before. Or it's been a long time, I guess. It's been since, like, the friggin' N-Gage or something, since I've seen something that just sad and depressing. But Nintendo is considering their options at this point. The Wii U has been such a colossal failure, and it's clearly not going to pick up steam, or if it does, it's not going to pick up enough to compete with the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4. Nintendo's been out there saying, one good game can turn a whole system around this whole time. That's been their basic attitude for the first year of this generation, because the Wii U was doing so poorly. But I think if any game was going to be that game for Nintendo, it would have been Super Mario 3D World, which was a really good platformer, and, the next entry in a super famous series. But I think Nintendo has, for one thing, kind of lessened the value of that Mario IP by releasing New Super Mario Bros. 2, New Super Mario Bros. U, and Super Mario 3D World, all within about a year of each other, almost exactly a year. And with the fact that there are so few Wii U's out there, that makes the fact that Mario will not sell that well pretty much inevitable. I remember hearing that Pikmin moved something like 130,000 units when it launched, and that was like a big success for Nintendo, because think of that in terms of the market percentage. Like, a pretty large percentage of those 2.8 million people who will supposedly own a Wii U by the end of this March will own Pikmin 3, or they will own Super Mario 3D World. But it's not moving systems like Nintendo obviously hoped it would, and it's not moving systems like a Mario game would back in the day either. There's just too much competition out there, and they're just doing too many smart things, and Nintendo is doing too many dumb things with the Wii U. And I don't know what's going to happen with this thing, and Nintendo doesn't seem like they do either. We've got a lot of shakeups and a lot of changes coming with Nintendo's business model and the way that they do business in general, which could potentially bring their games to other platforms. Nintendo's Iwata announced that they are considering a new business structure which could potentially bring Mario and Zelda and Metroid and all those other guys / girls to handheld platforms that are not owned by Nintendo, specifically iOS platforms or Android platforms. Let's see if we can get a quote here. Given the expansion of smart devices, we are naturally studying how smart devices can be used to grow the game player business. The the way people use their time, their lifestyles, who they are, have changed. Just open a new tab. Their lifestyles, who they are, have changed. If we stay in one place, we will become outdated. So that was right after Nintendo announced a 69% cut to their expected units shipped through for the Wii U. And yeah, that's super obvious. If they had thought of that like 3 years ago or so, when everybody else was thinking of that, then I think they would be in a much better position right now. But it just seems like they've already been outdated for several years, and it kind of seems like with the Wii U, at least, they're floundering. The 3DS is also not selling as many units as they had hoped it would. They've also revised those sales projections down from 18 million by the end of March to 13.5 million. But, you know, it's doing okay, and the games on that system are absolutely incredible. All you have to do is look at our top 20 games of 2013 list to see Animal Crossing and Fire Emblem and other awesome stuff like that in there. But the console itself is not selling as well as Nintendo would have hoped. And in light of that, a lot of people have been calling for Iwata to resign, or they've been kind of whispering maybe Iwata will resign. And so there's been a lot of talk of a resignation and a shakeup in terms of management at Nintendo. And according to Iwata himself, there will be no major management shakeup in the short term. So if you like what he's been doing, you don't have to worry. He's not going to be gone anytime in the near future. However, investors might not like that. He has been, well, you know, it's hard to say how much of that is him and then how much of it is the rest of Nintendo as a whole, but they have, as a whole, been kind of tanking and kind of bombing on things in pretty much like rapid succession over the last couple of years. The 3DS was kind of a joke when that thing launched. The Wii U has been a joke for over a year now, even though it does have some really good games on it, like Pikmin, like Mario, like Zelda, like The Wonderful 101 is really awesome. Seriously, buy The Wonderful 101. I think that thing sold like 17,000 copies in its first month or something absolutely horrifying like that. And it's a really, really good game, so you should check it out if you have a Wii U. So it does have good games, but the problem is it just doesn't have the players. And, you know, even going into 2014 where we have stuff like Donkey Kong, which seems like a lot of fun, Mario Kart 8, which seems like a lot of fun, Bayonetta 2, which seems like it's going to be absolutely incredible. The future is really uncertain for that thing, and it's kind of sad. Speaking of the 3DS, we have trailers up for a new Persona game from Atlus, Persona Q Shadow of the Labyrinth. This is a dungeon crawling game just like Persona 3 and Persona 4, but it mashes the casts of those games together, and then it shrinks them down to chibi size, and it's so cute. I want this game so badly. This is one of like 4 Persona games that's coming in the next year or so from Atlus. But God, it looks super good. So we've got Chie, who every seasoned Persona 4 player knows is the true romance option. And then we've got Akihiko in 2 trailers, both showing off a little bit of the animation, a little bit of the dialogue, and kind of like, you know, similar dialogue stuff that you would have seen in Persona 3 or 4. And of course some of the combat and some of the dungeon crawling as well. And there's even like a little glimpse of an animated cutscene in Chie's video. So we've got videos for Akihiko and Chie up on the site. If you're interested in Persona, and you should be, go check it out. 2K and Bethesda have partnered to bundle their games together for $30. Borderlands and Dishonored are going to be bundled together. That's $30, and then BioShock and Skyrim are going to be bundled together for for $30. And these are going to come to the PS3 and the Xbox 360 only, no PC versions. And launch date is February 11th. Yes. February 11th. So on February 11th, you can get 4 of the best games of this generation for a total of $60, which is not a bad deal at all. Assuming you've somehow managed to go all this time without playing Skyrim, Borderlands 2, Bioshock Infinite, or Dishonored, in which case you bring shame upon all of us. Alienware is bringing their Steam machine to market in September, and the price should be competitive with current gen consoles, current gen as in Xbox One and PS4. So that's really all the details we've gotten. That was news from Steam's Dev Days. So September launch for the Alienware Steam box, so definitely expect Steam boxes to be hitting by this fall. And, you know, they say pricing is competitive, but Valve and others have also said in the past that the lowest priced Steam box will be $500, so expect Alienwares to hit around $500 to $600, somewhere in that range. They've never been known for being super affordable, but at the same time, they're probably the most recognizable brand that's hopping on board with this Steam box whole deal. And Valve is probably looking to them to be that kind of entry-level console that you can just buy for a flat price and then hook up to your TV. And so that's probably the Steam machine, if any, that is targeted at competing with the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4. A $65 Xbox One Titanfall controller is coming. It is going to be released around the same time as the game in March, and it will have a white and orange design like one of the mechs from the game. Valve has been talking about making Greenlight go away for indie developers, and presumably moving towards personalized storefronts. Dev Days happened, and there was not much in the way of a mention from Greenlight, or from the Greenlight end of things, but Valve posted that our goal is to make Greenlight go away, not because it's not useful, but because we're evolving. So there's kind of like a common theory among indie developers who post to Greenlight that Valve is kind of purging Greenlight of all the stuff that could potentially be Greenlight. And, you know, you see them doing these like, we're greenlighting 100 games today, we're greenlighting 50 games today, whatever. So that's kind of the foundation of that theory, is that they're just trying to purge all of these games in massive swaths that have a chance of actually being greenlit before they get rid of Greenlight as a service. And so that way, you know, good games ideally don't get stuck in Greenlight and in some kind of weird limbo. And then they kind of move towards whatever it is they're going to do next. A Dark Souls inspired RPG called Lords of the Fallen was announced, and we've got a trailer for it. This was on the 15th, and Lords of the Fallen is coming from ex-CD Projekt Red developer Tomáš Gop, I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, and he cannot stop comparing it to Dark Souls, so it'll probably be like a next-gen Dark Souls. Lords of the Fallen is a game that is not a game about, and I don't want to get this wrong because we do have a storyline, we have characters, NPCs, and quests, but it's not a game where you would like to take out 100 hours of storyline and 1,000 side quests. This is a game about crossing the gap and the difference between being a random noob at the beginning and a seasoned pro player at the end. That is a quote from Tomáš to VG247, which helped him announce the game over the last week. At the end of the day, I could honestly say I own the game, and this is talking about Dark Souls, and this is exactly what you're trying to get with the run. This is exactly what you're trying to get with the right mindset in games like Dark Souls, and I believe Lords is going to do the same thing. So there's a CG trailer out for it right now, which we have embedded in the article, and it definitely looks a lot more like Diablo to me than Dark Souls right now, just because of the color palettes and the character designs, and the weapon designs, and all that stuff. But if maybe we can end up with something that's kind of like a fusion of Diablo and Dark Souls or something like that, or even if it is basically just Dark Souls but prettier and with different art, which is kind of what it sounds like at this point, could do worse. So I've been thinking of hopping into Dark Souls myself here lately. A lot of people have been streaming it and stuff like that. Battlefield 4 has gotten a stability patch on the PlayStation 4. So there's a ton of stuff that this patch fixes, which I'm just going to go over really quickly here. Keep in mind this is PS4 only, and this was on the 14th, so could be a different patch up by the time you watch this. But the full fix list is various fixes for improving general stability, fixed flickering in map and minimap on Rogue Transmission and Operation Locker, fixed issue with players spawning under the map in Lanking Dam, increased damage by 25% for the Stealth Jet 20mm cannons, normalized repair rates across all vehicles. Vehicles with lower health points, like aircraft and transport vehicles, now repair more slowly than before. Fixed a bug where the M1 Abrams coaxial HMG ammo box was occasionally blocking the driver's camera. Fix for friendly marker not always showing when needed to, resulting in players shooting team members. I've definitely had that one happen a lot. Fixed problem with killer health and kill card not being correctly updated, showing 100% health even though the soldier was hurt. I feel like I've had that one happen a lot of times. For European players, they fixed a bug where the game wouldn't start when the console was running in any of these languages: Japanese, Dutch, Portuguese, traditional Chinese, Korean, Czech, Brazilian, and Portuguese. Or I guess that's Brazilian Portuguese, rather. A fix for a bug where it looked like the soldier was dying with 1 health instead of 0. Have had that happen a bunch of times. And fixed a player feedback timing issue where blood was appearing before other damage indicators and before damage was actually done. So since this patch, I've experienced a bug where in normal game modes, not in hardcore, but just, jumping into a quick match, the hit indicator has not been showing up. So I guess maybe that's a new issue for Battlefield players to watch out for, resulting from this patch. Not totally sure, but those issues should all be fixed by now. Double Fine's been talking about Broken Age quite a bit, and in case you haven't noticed on Steam, there is a new business plan going behind that game. Originally it was intended to be an early access title, but now it's going to be released in sort of a season pass form. So if you buy Broken Age now, it's $25 upfront, or less if you get it right now because it's on sale for a whole pre-order thing. And then you get Episode 2 as free DLC when it's done. You may recall at one point that Broken Age was planned for release under the Steam Early Access program, Double Fine wrote on the Kickstarter page. This is no longer the case. For various logistical reasons, and because we believe Act 1 is a polished and satisfying piece of content in its own right, Broken Age will be a standard Steam release that includes a season pass granting access to Act 2 once it is complete. Anyone who has Act 1, either by being a backer or by buying the game separately, will receive Act 2 as a free update when it's ready. So that's Broken Age. Double Fine tried to do a review embargo of that, which we wrote about on the 14th, and they basically said, even if you get the game early as a backer, you're embargoed from talking about it until the game comes out for everybody else. But since then, they have actually fixed that, and now you're seeing reviews go up and you're seeing people talk about it. So, people didn't like the whole embargo thing. Some of the creators of the Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre series are making a new Kickstarter. And I actually cannot remember the name, so I've got to pop this page open. Yes, it's Unsung Story. So we've got Hitoshi Sakamoto, Alexander O. Smith, Joseph Reeder, and Yasumi Matsuno. Totally blanked on that name and had to look it up. But the 4 of them are working on Unsung Story, which is a strategy RPG kind of in a similar vein to Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre and stuff like that. And together, these guys have worked on those 2 games, those 2 series, as well as Vagrant Story and Final Fantasy XII, among other titles. So that's a Kickstarter going on right now. Again, that's Unsung Story. We wrote about it almost as soon as it went up, and it already had over $40,000. The goal is $60,000. And I just clicked it open to check it out, and it currently has 9,234 backers, $223,223 out of 600,000, and there are 25 days left to go. So I think it's pretty safe to say that they'll make it. You know, the pledges are starting at $3, which will basically just get you a thank you, and they go all the way up to, I believe, $10,000. Yeah, $10,000, which there are only 5 of, and that one will receive the $400 rewards, which whatever that is, plus a Skype meeting with the Playdeck team there, who's like the main development team is in California, not Japan. So the vast bulk of this game is actually being developed by people in California, just helped out by a couple of big names from Japan. So you get all that stuff. You get a Skype meeting with the Playdeck team to go over production, an Unsung Story development t-shirt. You have your face in the game as an NPC or a soldier. Receive a specially made Gikli, I'm not sure what that is, framed art piece created and signed by the Playdeck art team. Receive an invitation to the Unsung Story launch party and have dinner and drinks with Joel Goodman, Gary Weiss, Jeff Garstecki, Yasumi Matsuno, and more in Japan. Travel and accommodations not included. So yep, that is the big new Kickstarter as of late. What else? I already went over the Assassin's Creed Liberation review. PSN has a sale going on. I think I went over that last week. So yeah, I think that's just about it for the last week of news and reviews. Let's see, let's head over to Steam, as we so often do. We've had some new releases that were not on the bracket last time when I went over some stuff. So we have Estranged Act 1, which is a free adventure game, which is kind of interesting in concept, which is, as far as I know, it's a story about a fisherman who gets like stranded on some island, and it's kind of like an exploration focused kind of thing. Spellforce 2 Demons of the Past came out on the 16th. Demons of the Past is the epic new chapter of Spellforce, the unique blend of RPG and RTS. So it sounds kind of like that Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings, I think it was, game that came out on the 3DS, or on the regular DS, rather, back in like 2009, 2008, 2007 or 2008, like somewhere in that range. And then Guilty Gear Asuka is out. That came out on the 16th as well. So now let's switch over to coming soon. We've got Kickbeat Steam Edition that is coming out tomorrow on the 20th, and that is like a rhythm game / beat 'em up kind of mix up, where you're like a kung fu dude and there's stuff flying at you and you've got to hit buttons in time with the objects that kind of fly at you from left, right, up, and down. And the more on beat you are, the better you do in the fight. Insurgency is an early access indie title. It is $20, and it is coming to Steam on the 22nd. And this is kind of like a, I don't want to say Counter-Strike looking FPS because it doesn't look as nice right now, I don't think. But it looks like kind of like it looks like they're aiming for like a hardcore kind of sect, and it's focused on close combat multiplayer gameplay, and it's powered by Source, so you know, Counter-Strike comparisons are maybe fair. And so that's coming out on the 22nd for early access. What else do we have coming up? There is Recoil plus map creation mod tools. which is coming for $10.50, normally $15 on the 28th. Make your own maps and share them online. Create your own FPS levels and maps with the built-in recoil construction kit. Use the powerful modding tools to bring your custom arena designs to life and share them online with other recoil players. Frag your enemies back to the Stone Age. So that's coming out on the 28th. So we're already getting into stuff that's not even coming out next week. So next week is looking pretty barren, I guess. Broken Age is one of the few big releases for the rest of this month, and that is coming out on the 28th. And so is Tomb Raider Prettier Edition, or whatever they're calling the next-gen version of that game. That is also coming out on the 28th, so not a ton of stuff happening next week. But fortunately, I did stumble over something that released very quietly on Steam towards the end of the week. And that would be Lauren the Amazon Princess, which is currently running at $18. Normally it's $20. And this is an RPG/adventure game which stars an Amazon princess named Lauren. And she's trying to find her mother, Karen. And the Amazon looks suspiciously like some kind of weird, like, JRPG overworld from the mid-90s with, like, volcanoes and ice mountains and shit lying around. So I don't think these people really know what the Amazon is, but I've been playing, that's Lauren's music, that's her theme right there. I've been playing Lauren the Amazon Princess on Steam, and I'm going to have a review of that for you, hopefully Monday, maybe Monday night, Tuesday morning. So look out for that, because that's sure to be special. It's quite special indeed. So that's what's coming up over the next week. Not much, but hey, Lauren the Amazon Princess will be there, so you know it's going to be a party. Yeah, that's going to do it for this video, I think. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more, and stay tuned next week when we're going to have a Lauren the Amazon Princess review and plenty more news.